So hi everyone, my name is Zuleika Sgro and I'm the Vice President of People at Saje Natural Wellness and I'm based in Toronto, Ontario. So I graduated from Waterloo within the co-op program and was in the pleasure of being in the program of arts and business. And I actually did my co-op at retail services at Waterloo. So I worked in the bookstore every single term and actually made it, in addition, a part-time job. So while I was working towards my degree in HR, I got this great retail experience right at the university. Well, I think retail and now, really working in an HR function within a retail environment, I'm so grateful for the early learning that I achieved working a retail job. So there's great skills like customer service, which is so transferable in any industry, communication, another, key aspect and attribute that every employer is looking for, and also resilience and patience. I think, learning that ability in retail, again, really translates well into other industries and is such a good foundation for students. And I know I really valued that experience myself. So we have an array of open roles that we love to see students in. So our business is vertically integrated. So we own, all aspects of our supply chain, which gives us such bandwidth in terms of the roles that we have at Sage. So we look at students for retail roles in our stores. So customer service representatives, team leads, key leads. We also have a customer service department that's remote. So we also would look for students all across, North America to join that team and support our customers online or through our digital business. And then within our distribution centers, we have a big distribution center in Surrey, BC, as well as Toronto. We would hire students into those roles and also look to leverage them for special projects, specifically in the holiday season, analyzing the business from whatever kind of vantage point that they're in. And I think one of the important things about onboarding a co-op student within these types of roles is that you give them some type of assignment that can really add value to the area that they're contributing in. So not only do they get to do the job at Sage, but then they also get to do a bit of a postmortem with us to kind of analyze, hey, this is what I thought worked well. This is what I could change, in the future based on thinking about the business more holistically. So we do, in light of COVID, we adapted our onboarding. Prior to COVID, everything was in person. So Sage has gone through incredible transformation to adopt e-learning, to adopt remote work. And so what we've done is our biggest area of development and training is actually the product knowledge. So we've been able to actually make that e-learning for everybody in the business. And that is something that everybody in the business experiences. So no matter what role you have, we provide you product knowledge so that you can really get to know the benefits of our product. Ultimately, no matter what role you're in, you have connection to it. So that has all been leveraged through e-learning now. And then depending on what role you have, so customer service is all virtual onboarding because they're a virtual role now. Retail would be a hybrid, so you do your product training at home or offsite, and then you would come into the store and do some physical training similar to distribution. If you have a job at our distribution centers, some of it is physical. So just to kind of understand how the operations work, and then your product training would be virtual. So it's a hybrid. So no, to be honest, I think, all of our students have been an injection of, excitement and fresh air to the business. I think one of the watchouts I'd give employers, and this is some feedback that we received from our staff, is that you want to ensure, that, you give awareness to the organization of students being in the business, what their function is, and how other people in the organization can support them, even if they're not their managers. Reason being is that often our students would have other opportunities that maybe a full-time employee wouldn't have, like, for example, that special assignment. So I think it's important for people to have awareness so that, they can, support them and also understand the differences in the job design. You can never over communicate. So that would be one of my biggest learnings, just to ensure that, the business is aware of the program. I'm excited that we're embarking on more relationships with schools. So Waterloo, we're really excited, to formally kick off a program in the new year. I think because we've been a Vancouver-based organization, we've really, and prior to COVID, we were all in person. We've really narrowed our programs and hiring of students to universities or colleges in British Columbia. So, something that we're really looking at for next year, and anything that we can do this year, is to attract talent who are interested, students all over Canada, as well as in the US, because, we do operate in both countries. So just really expanding our reach and awareness. So hiring has been top of mind for us, especially as we approach this big season. So one of the big practices that our leaders and our people team are taking on is really ensuring that we remove barriers in our recruitment process to ensure that it feels, as inclusive and as easy as possible to apply and to be aware of the jobs that are available at Sage. And then secondly, really reevaluating minimum shifts and giving people flexibility. I think that's the biggest piece of feedback that we've heard in light of the pandemic, even from our existing staff, is that more people need and want flexibility in how and when they work versus having kind of fixed or required hours. So that's really something, that we've embarked on, and we've looked at all areas of those three areas that we're hiring in, customer service, retail, and distribution, where we have some fluctuation. So it's advice I'd also give to other employers to remove barriers and look at some of the maybe constraints you have on those jobs and determine, can you shift those or change those to make it more appealing. I've always been proud of our retention rates as an organization, and one of, in terms of industry, we're really lucky to be, above the bar. Definitely still experience turnover, quite a bit of it in retail, but not, not 100% turnover or anything, that's quite industry standard. One of the things that we're finding that's really important in terms of retention is that, we reiterate what the experience would be like to work at Sage and what differentiates us. So there's a couple of things that we've been focusing on in our communication and also reiterating to our staff. So our employee assistance program has never been in higher use than it is this year and over the last 18 months. So we've upped our benefits there, ensuring that no matter, again, how many hours you work at Sage, that is something that everybody in the organization has access to. That we extended that as well to people's families. So if you work at Sage and you need support from employee assistance, not only can you use it, but your family can as well. Really differentiating in terms of, the type of business we are. So we are purpose-led. We offer wellness products to the world. And I also think that's been beneficial for us right now in terms of what's going on in the world. I think people want to be part of, making the world healthier and also investing in their own health. So, we've really ensured that we're, leveraging our internal products, promoting our discount for staff as well, I think has been really important and key. And then also when it comes to new product launches, getting our staff involved in terms of what do we think our community is going to want, and how do we get you more involved in the end consumer experience? I think people at the end of the day want to feel purpose in their jobs, and that's not a new concept, but I think it's more prominent. It's more of our responsibility now more than ever as an employer to ensure that people know their purpose at work. And so those are the key things. And then of course, from a compensation and benefits perspective, that's something that we are really evaluating constantly in terms of how the market changes. We want to ensure that we're fair, competitive, and paying equitably across the organization. So we've gone through quite a big exercise this year to ensure we've achieved, that level of equity within any area of the workforce. Yeah, so we embarked, as many organizations did, on a really important awareness around DE&I from a brand perspective. So late last year, we held listening sessions with our entire workforce to give them, and we brought an external expert in, and we wanted to give everyone space to share, what they'd like to see change at Sage, what we should stop, start, and continue doing. And from that, we were able to build, a team member driven roadmap in terms of how we could prioritize, being better as an organization when it comes to DE&I. And some of the key priorities this year, based on what we heard from our staff, was education. So giving people more training and education on these important topics. So two important learnings that we launched this year was unconscious bias training. So that was, launched to everyone in the organization. It's part of our onboarding program now. And then in addition, a version for all hiring managers to ensure that we captured any unconscious bias awareness at the hiring stage was critical. And then for our leadership and executive team, we've done a lot of awareness training, specifically for, awareness on how to work with the Indigenous community this year. So education has really been a key strategy of ours. And that is, it's a journey. There's no kind of end state for us at Sage. We want to continue to be better and do better, and also continue to hear from our staff in terms of what they want to see. If I was to coin it in one word, it would be choice. I think, one, people have more choices than they ever have in terms of where they work, how they work, what type of work they do, and even just what they choose to prioritize. Because the pandemic, if I ask myself, am I the same person? Or if we all ask ourselves, are you the same person you were 18 months ago? I think most of us would say no. So when the world and us as individuals go through that much change, I think our choice hierarchy changes as well. So our workforce, and what I'm seeing in the marketplace, is, more of a demand for how, control over how and where and what a person works on. And while I don't think, a lot of these strategies like remote work and flexibility were far reached by any means in terms of what we knew was going to be motivating for people, I think the speed in which it has progressed has been, unprecedented. Like, we've never, done this before. We've never gone remote overnight. And so I think as a leader, what I'm really watching out for is our leadership team making sure that they have the equipment and the tools to lead teams in this new kind of diverse environment. I think they're the ones that I think about the most and that are struggling the most, because not only are they, in this also choice hierarchy in terms of reevaluating, they're leading and responsible for teams, they're managing in ways they've never managed before, and then they're dealing with new pressures of the business that we never had. And so that's a lot of responsibility in addition to everything that's going on in the world personally. So I think, what I'm seeing and why I share that is there's a lot of, I'd say, draw that I've seen in the marketplace to actually not be a people leader. I think people are looking for really great roles that are individual contributors, or that, again, have more flexibility and more control over just yourself and your output, versus, I think in the past there was such a high demand for levels and leadership and people, number of reports, and that meant more to people, I think, than it does today, because of some of those reasons. So I'm really curious about how, the workforce will flatten, how, people's choice in terms of how and where and what they work on will reprioritize business strategies, and ultimately how businesses will continue to adapt, because, we have to meet somewhere in the middle at the end of the day, and everybody is still kind of learning how do we do that effectively. So one of the strategies and a piece of advice that I would give to everyone is, don't underestimate how much you can learn and listen from your people. Even though no one has all the answers, it's so important to keep the dialogue open so that you're, constantly keeping a pulse on things, as opposed to being surprised, time after time. I think if you create a dialogue and you're not committed on one strategy, I think you can phase your strategies and say, here are some of the things we're going to implement today, and we're going to reevaluate it in 4 months. And, I think just giving people some flexibility, choice, and fluidity is really important. So, it doesn't deviate too much in terms of some of the themes of what I've shared so far, but I think, ensuring that people who are hiring students are also, giving choice and flexibility to this really critical workforce. I think, again, any demographic that's probably demanding it the most is our students. And, there's a lot of priorities on the go in addition to, just the year and a half that we've all been through. And I think retail, again, is such an amazing learning ground for really life skills in terms of wherever your longer term career takes you. And so to give, that insight to students in terms of taking on a role in retail is such a great opportunity and will contribute to your business. And it's important that you look at flexibility, look at choice, look at how people can work, and, just remove some of the barriers that maybe, you didn't even think were barriers, but go through that exercise with members of your team and say, what do you think gets in the way of us hiring people? What are some of the things today that we can change in our process, adapt or add? And I guarantee you'll be surprised with what you hear. So actually last year, we onboarded a student from UBC in our distribution center right at the time where our business was, flipping to be an e-commerce business in essence overnight. And so one of the things that the student did was kind of a bit of what I described earlier. So they were in our logistics side of the business, which in itself was going through such transformation at that time of year. And what they did was they started to help us gain vendor relationships with other carriers. So other, carriers internationally and locally, kind of as a side project, thinking, oh, this will be nice to have, or this will be good to kind of have in our back pocket if anything significantly changes with the industry. And so we've continued to leverage that list and are so thankful that those relationships started to build really early on before everybody else's kind of competition came into place. And, the diversity of understanding how we were going to fulfill a lot of our orders became a real problem. We were able to leverage this work to have a really strong starting ground. So, again, I think it's so important to give students meaningful work. And, even if you don't know exactly what it's going to be used for, but you think it's something that, could have longer strategic value, is a really good nice to have. One of my biggest learnings with COVID is, business continuity, planning, those things that we've never had time for have never been so important. So even looking at your business continuity planning, which is, why that project kind of came to light for us, getting, a student who has a fresh perspective could be really impactful. So I think, when we look at, our e-commerce experience, our in-store kind of customer journey and experience, I think, something that we're doing now a lot of is also testing and learning from our consumers. So ultimately they're the future and they're going to drive this economy forward. So understanding, what they value in a brand like Sage, what works from an efficacy perspective, what types of products do they find beneficial in their routine, and what don't they find, beneficial. I think one of the important things, and that's something that we're looking at as well, is what are we doing from our past that just doesn't make sense anymore, or that we're just doing because we've always done it. I think it's really important to always reevaluate and encourage people in your business to question that and to say, hey, why are we doing this? Or what value does it add? And I think, students coming in, especially in co-op positions, can do that for you really easily. And also it's important that they're given the platform for feedback. Well, thank you so much, everyone. I apologize I couldn't be with you in person. Hopefully this is, the next best thing. Please don't hesitate to reach out to me directly if you have any questions. I know the team here has my contact information, but wishing you all the best for this back half of the year.